Professor Chidi Odinkalu is the reviewer of this book, a former chairman of the National Human Rights Commission, and a very erudite lawyer, a professor at the Harvard University. Just yesterday, we got news that there was a domestic accident involving his wife, and that is just the reason why he is not here. But he is ably represented by a human rights lawyer, a Commonwealth scholar at the University of Oxford, who earned his master's and business degrees from the University of Maastricht in Netherlands and Essex University, United Kingdom. Can we put our hands together for Dr. Stanley Ibe, the book reviewer? Let's put our hands together for him, please.
Good afternoon. I don't have a PhD yet, so it's unfair to add that. The chair of the occasion, former president of Nigeria, the author. Let me adopt the protocols already established so that we save strong time. Between President Obasanjo and Mr. Oyeko, we made the job of the reviewer a lot easier. Because Chidi's review begins with that interesting story that happened back in 1970 in Mr. Simeon Okeke, Chief Simeon Okeke's home. Now it's interesting, the one line that you didn't hear is that they were not introduced at that meeting. They only got, I think the story of that meeting only got told several years after on the flight to the US. And what led to that we'll hear in the course of this review. Chief Okeke, like you've heard, was sworn in as the chair of the Police Service Commission on the 28th of November 2001. And I'm sure you heard previous speakers tell you that the PSC was actually a colonial bequest to Nigeria. And it's interesting that that was the case because, I mean, the Nigerian police is an institution that is that has its origins to 1861. And throughout the time of colonial administration, the political leadership of the country, the colonial office, had the police reporting directly to them. And that has been the case for most of our post-colonial history. So even though they bequeathed a civilian oversight institution to Nigeria, the police institution itself was not used to being oversighted by civilians. So that was a bit of a challenge. Now Chief says, policing the police, I'm going to quote him, is Chief Okeke's timely and thoughtful retrospective on policing and the Nigerian police force. It unfolds in 15 chapters that address different aspects of the institutional evolution, bureaucratic machinations, relational episodes, and reform proposals in policing and police oversight, viewed from the vantage point of Chief Okeke's tenure and experience with the Police Service Commission. Major themes in the book, as you will see, include histories of the Nigerian police force and the Police Service Commission, and of presidential and political institutionalization of both institutions. You also find themes such as abuses of the roles and the powers of the IGP and the president, the role of the PSC in election monitoring, the role of the president in a transitional democracy, the travails of civilian oversight of the security services, and issues of police reform, including state police and community policing. You heard some of the discussions about state police from this podium. Now, I will go into the context because, I mentioned the police force began as the consular guard of 30 men back in 1861. And it's important to remember that it was a colonial bequest, and that the police as an institution was not used to having external civilian oversight. Now, Chief Okeke makes a very interesting point about the decapitation of the Nigerian police force by successive military governments. And in this case, he was referring to the government of Major General Muhammadu Buhari. I quote Chief Okeke: "After dissolving the parliament, the very next day the coup took place. Their next target," and there refers to the military, "was the Nigerian police force. The Nigerian police was forced to dispose of the sophisticated weapons in its armory, including armored vehicles just cleared from the wharf under Inspector General of Police Sunday Adewusi. All recruitments were also halted. In a matter of time, the police had a lot of vacancies arising from retirements, dismissals, and deaths. Additionally, promotions were not forthcoming. The Police Service Commission was just existing in name." It's important to keep that in mind. Under Major General Muhammadu Buhari, as you may have heard before, his 2IC, Brigadier General Tunde Diagon, was the nominal chair of the Police Service Commission. And essentially, under General Ibrahim Babangida, the Police Service Commission was abrogated. I won't mention the law because that has been said before. And in his place, he established the Police Council, which has got the military head of state, the state governors, and the Inspector General of Police as members. As you can imagine, all of these people are appointees of the president or the head of state. These changes from 1960 meant that the PSC, unfortunately, did not have institutional members. At inauguration in 2001, the PSC neither had an office nor staff. The PSC's power over the IGP was also withdrawn under the 1999 Constitution. Now, that point has been made previously. The idea that the PSC had powers over every single police officer, including the Inspector General of Police, and then by constitutional review, that was changed to exclude the Inspector General of Police. Now, what that dynamic meant was that since you had the president as the head of the Police Council, and the IGP was appointed by the president and directly responsible to him, the Police Service Commission had a difficult task ahead of it. Upon assumption of office, Chief Okeke had no predecessor to learn from. And he was up against an institution, as you might recall, that did not have the culture of independent civilian oversight. Over his 5-year term, Chief Okeke worked with 1 president and 3 IGPs. Now, I'm going to quote Chidi. The first of the IGPs was fired, the second was convicted for fraud and embezzlement, and the third, as Chief Okeke himself recalls, practically, quote, shoved aside the PSC and took directives only from the president. Now, that point you will recall has been a recurring point in this room for some time. Now, this context meant that the job of the Police Service Commission was not, to use Chidi's words, for the faint of heart. In the course of time, IGP Tafa Balogun managed to get the PSC to delegate much of his powers over appointment and recruitment for all ranks up to Superintendent of Police back to the police. Now, the history of that, I'm sure you will pick up in the book, is a very interesting history, and I recommend that you read that part. Now, when during the successor IGP Sunday Ibe's time, the PSC decided to reverse that, to go back to what the PSC was supposed to be doing, Ehidero led a campaign to get back those powers. He failed to win that campaign, but he managed to persuade the then Chief of Staff to the President to advise the President to do one of 3 things. 1, require the Police Service Commission to revoke the modification. 2, sack the Police Service Commission. Or 3, get the National Assembly to alter the powers of the Police Service Commission. This meant that the Police Service Commission was in even more difficult terrain. Regardless of that difficulty, The Police Service Commission under Chief Okeke managed to achieve a number of things. First, they institutionalized a police management team that reflects Nigeria's geopolitical diversity. Second, they got the Nigerian police force to reflect that same diversity in the appointment of Assistant Inspectors General of Police. And then he successfully pioneered oversight of police conduct during elections. He also, together with his team, of course, cleared backlogs of promotions, established mechanisms for discipline and promotions, and began the expansion of the footprint of the Police Service Commission into zonal offices across the country. Of course, he confronted a number of challenges. One of them is the tension. This point has been made over and over again between the presumed independence of the Commission and the resources it had available to it to get the job done. I recall just looking through that book just yesterday, because I only got this invitation in the last 36 hours. I think the first set of meetings you had was actually at the Hilton. The commission itself, your management board had to meet in your room in the Hilton because you didn't have offices. So they had very lean budget, they had enormous powers like you heard in the past, and they were up against, don't forget, an institution that was not used to having civilian oversight. So that was a challenge. Now, the other challenge had to do with, again, something that has been mentioned before, the pension for IGPs to try and undermine the powers of the Police Service Commission. And I think he points to one example where, unfortunately, a member of his commission managed to serve as a willing tool in the hands of the politicians and the leadership of the police force. The story of that commissioner you will find in the book, and I encourage that you read that story about. Another challenge relates to the presumed independence of the Inspector General of Police, the Police Service Commission, and the Police Council. Regrettably, all of these people are beholden to the President. Even the most recent amendment to the Nigerian Police Act, which provides a tenure to the Office of the Inspector General of Police, does not diminish the dependence of the Inspector General of Police on the President. The Police Council, as you know, is merely advisory. Now, the Constitution and the Police Service Commission statute make the Police Service Commission a body with considerable powers of decision and rulemaking. It has managed to evolve, in the context of the challenges I have described above, into an advocacy institution which found its way around some of the challenges relating to the politics of policing in Nigeria. Now, Dr. Chris Ngige is here. There's an interesting story in the book about his removal from office as governor of Anambra in 2004, and I'll try and summarize that story. According to Chief Okeke, President Obasanjo instructed the Inspector General of Police, and through the Inspector General of Police, the Commissioner of Police Anambra, to withdraw police protection from the government when the state was under violent attack from close political associates of the President. As chair of Police Service Commission, Chief Okeke directed the Commissioner of Police to protect the governor instead. As a matter of fact, when you read that book, the Commissioner of Police, I think it's a good place to start. The Commissioner of Police actually rang him up. He was in his village, if I remember the story very well. And the Commissioner of Police rang him up and said, "This is the instruction I've got from Abuja." And he said, "You know what you do? Go protect the governor. I will take responsibility for whatever happens." Now, upon being summoned to the villa, Chief Okeke explained that the President's will could not override the clear dictates of the Constitution on the mode of removal of a sitting government. When it appeared that the President could not be persuaded, Chief Okeke subtly offered to resign his position. Something that is unfortunately in very short supply in today's Nigeria. The President, of course, declined that offer. The problems of the police and policing in Nigeria remain fairly constant. Now, this is somewhat heartbreaking for me. In January 2002, a group known as, quote, warrant officers in the Nigerian Army and their equivalents in the Navy, Air Force, and inspectors of quite a long name, inspectors of police and the rank and file of the armed forces and police of Nigeria, made public problems in the joint services inherited from the military. They included, 1, no security in the country on account of the deployment of soldiers and police officers to guard duties for senior, serving, and retired officers and their relations and friends, as well as the rich and powerful. Does that still happen today? 2, crime continues to increase because policemen and soldiers are attached to both 419 dealers and other dubious persons because they give big money to senior officers or to those connected to those in the corridors of power. Does that still happen today? And 3, soldiers and police officers with good records stay on one rank from 5 to 15 years or more without promotion. Does that still happen today? Few others who have godfathers are promoted about 3 times within the same few years. Upon the expiration of his term in 2006, Chief Okeke was entitled to a second term, but he was not interested. Meantime, IGP Sunday Ehilere had managed to convince the president to have the Police Service Commission headed by a retired police officer. Now, this is an interesting point because at some point in that book, I read of Chief Okeke's encounter with Chief Obasanjo, where he said that that advice was not a sound one. The Police Service Commission, about the privilege of doing some work on police reform for most of my career. The Police Service Commission had actually worked with an organization that provided some resources to the first Service Commission under Chief Simeon Okeke. The Police Service Commission was designed as a civilian oversight institution. That point cannot be overemphasized. And we borrowed this idea from Kenya, from South Africa. And till tomorrow, they have managed to keep them civilian. Yeah. Now, so that advice began a long line of retired police officers chairing the Police Service Commission, from DIG Parry Osanyade to the most recent appointment. This tradition is unfortunately a perversion of what the Police Service Commission was created to do. Rather than make the relationship between the Police Service Commission, so the idea of having retired police officers, rather than make the relationship between the Police Service Commission and the police better, the tradition has worsened. As many in this room know, the question of who has primacy between the IGP and the PSC, and Mr. Eko calls it the boundary, over the appointment of police personnel is now before the Supreme Court. Now, to try and close up, Chidi says the delivery of this book is clear, its language is uncomplicated, and its claims based on well-documented evidence, nearly all of them disclosed in the appendices for those who wish to verify. If there's any flaw in the book, it is in its occasional slippage into repetition. In mitigation, much of the repetition is justified either by the need for emphasis or by the chronology of narration, which often necessitates a refreshing of reference to what occurred before or to what precedent events being recounted. Tafa Balogun, IGP Tafa Balogun, and Dr. Nana Aisha Abdulkadri, who was a member of the commission under Chief Simeon Okeke's leadership, received some unsparing treatment. Some could argue that both, being now dead, are unable to provide any rebuttal to the disclosures in the book concerning them. In response, the material on both persons in the book are mostly backed up by records which are equally provided in the appendices. In the context of the upcoming elections and the crisis of insecurity in Nigeria, this book offers far-reaching insights on the design of an architecture to govern the delivery of effective policing and even security vigilantes around the country, and argues a persuasive, might I add, compelling case for decentralization of the Nigerian police force. It is up to our leaders, the current leaders and the upcoming ones, to listen and implement some of the ideas and lessons contained in this book. I thank you for your attention.